the study pointed out that community autism prevalence was reduced by 1 to 2% with each 10 miles of distance from the pollution source. Now, the background of this study was that during the time period studied by the Texas team, they quoted the U.S. EPA estimating environmental mercury releases at 158 million tons annually nationwide in the late 1990s. That's, you know, I'm waiting for more updated figures, but it's probably even greater than that. Dr. Guttmacher and Dr. Boyle, when will, first of all, Dr. Guttmacher, are you aware of any studies other than this Texas study that has created a link between neurotoxic chemicals in the environment and increased rates of autism?
I'm certainly aware of other studies that look at, for instance, the one I mentioned earlier that was just published in the last week, looking, for instance, at auto emissions and proximity to auto emissions in pregnancy and early in life as a factor in terms of a causal relationship, who knows, but clearly an association between that exposure and autism rates.
But they've probably gone down since you've had catalytic converters. I'm speaking,
presumably.
I'm speaking of coal-burning power plants, which are being used and have been used in great frequency over the last couple of decades. Now, are you aware?
I certainly do not know all of the studies in the autism literature. I'd be happy to look into that and provide additional information for the record.
Other than the one from Texas that you're referring to from a couple of years ago, I'm not sure if there's another ecologic study like that. There have been a number of environmental studies that are at the individual level, but not at that sort of population ecologic level.
Well, it seems to me that if not in this Congress, the next Congress, that it would be timely, given the fact that this issue is out there and the amount of coal that has been burned in the last couple of decades, that a study be funded, that we actually look at it and determine whether or not the University of Texas study is confirmed or disconfirmed. The points of this study talk about, of course, exposure, neurodevelopment, the pace of neurodevelopment, vulnerability with respect to age, and also developmental vulnerabilities that begin with pregnant mothers. Of course, genetic susceptibility, as you pointed out, Dr. Gosar pointed out, that's always a factor. But now we know that the amount of emissions may be a factor. That's one of the things that's posited by this University of Texas study. And so, Mr. Chairman, as we move forward with this, because there is inevitably an amount of work that has to be done here that goes way beyond the politics and goes to pure science, or to science, that I think it would be helpful for us to, for the Congress to back a study that would determine once and for all whether the degree to which autism is linked to mercury-releasing sources, specifically the burning of coal, and with respect to the University of Texas study, the amount of emissions and the proximity to those emissions. And I just want to say in conclusion that all these families who are here, you have members of Congress on both sides of the aisle who are dedicated to trying to find out what's going on here and to try to do it in the interest of your family and future generations as well. So thank you for your presence here.
And thank you, Mr. Kucinich. We now go to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Meehan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank Drs. Boyle and Guttmacher for being here today. Let me just start my commentary by saying that as a first-term congressman, we are often impacted by issues that are brought to our attention by the constituents we serve. I can tell you that I don't know of another issue that has affected more of my constituents that have demonstrated a greater degree of frustration than this particular issue. And so it's new to me, and I'm listening to your testimony. But let me ask a question. I know that you studied this in 2007. We saw 1 in 150 children so diagnosed. And then in 2009, 1 in 110. and now we've diagnosed 1 in 88. So just in this short period of time, and 1 in 54 boys. Have you ever seen anything in which there has been such a dramatic progression in the incidence of diagnosis in a 6-year period, in your experience with the CDC?
Well, most of my experience actually has been within the context of developmental disabilities, and we do look at trends in other developmental disabilities.
Has anything had a trend with this kind of accelerating pace?
So actually, there was a paper published a couple months ago looking at trends in all the developmental disabilities, and the only one that showed an increase was attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Talking about at the CDC, we deal with a broad variety of health crises at certain points in time. Has anything accelerated in your experience to this degree in a 6-year period?
Well, again, relative to my area of expertise.
How about in general? You are in the CDC. What do you know about in general?
Right. Well, again, thinking specifically about what's going on with autism, you know, we have been looking at trends over time, and as you point out, there has been an increase. We do know that some of that increase is due to how children are identified and diagnosed in the community. So there have been changes over time that contribute in part. Our system monitors the number of children. We don't have all the information about what's happening in the context that influences how children are identified.
I guess what I'm saying is, and these are your words, not mine, as we've seen this remarkable acceleration just in the diagnoses, and in your words it was, this is a public health concern. Would you explain to me why this is not a public health crisis? Why this isn't an issue that is on the front burner of the CDC every day?
This is a very important issue to the CDC, and we are using the strengths of CDC to approach this issue. We are monitoring what CDC does, and its excellence is basically tracking and monitoring epidemiologic research and prevention.
And Dr. Boyle, thank you, because I know what you're saying is you're supporting that has been growing. Dr. Guttmeyer, the facts are clear. This has been accelerating at a remarkable pace, at least in terms of the diagnoses. What is being done to have a genuine, comprehensive plan in which we are looking for accountability year to year on the progress that's being made and in terms of what we're doing to better understand this issue?
It's a very important question, Congressman. I think part of it, again, goes back to the IACC having been created and asking for it to every year come up with an updated plan. I can tell you, I haven't checked my emails in the last couple of hours, obviously, but based upon simply the flurry of activity over the last few days alone, there really is work amongst
flurry
multiple...
because of our hearing, or flurry just...
No, because it's that time of year. We're aware that the year is coming to a close, and really trying to put together this year's plan in a very thoughtful way, looking at all of the research...
Who's in charge of this? Who wakes up in the morning and says, this is my priority, I am going to drive this train and make sure something happens today? Who's in charge of it?
I'd say there are a number of people that are doing it. The head of the IACC is Dr. Thomas Insel, who's the director of the National Institute of Mental Health at NIH. But there are multiple, and again, I think it shows, you asked about how important is this to CDC. It's very important. I know how it's important, I can tell you, to NIH. It's extremely important to NIH, and that's why, in fact, there are a number of institutes at the NIH that include autism as part of their research portfolio.
What does it take for us to develop a comprehensive national strategy with real accountability and timelines?
I'd say that, again, the IACC in many ways accomplishes that. If you think that that's lacking, then I would think it's a question really for the Congress to figure out how best to put that together, because clearly, as I think the hearing appropriately reflects, there are a lot of medical issues here, but there are a lot of issues about the lives of those who have autism that have nothing to do directly with medicine per se.
I get that, but where is the dynamism in which that emerging evidence is being challenged and being used in a dynamic concept to hurry to a discovery, at least an advance in this, as opposed to what may be just sort of a, I hate to say it, there's so many different aspects of there, but as an outside observer, I see it as being sort of willy-nilly, and this is the next thing that gets funded today and somebody tomorrow, as opposed to a real focus on a critical path.
Again, I think that there are multiple parties involved in this who are really quite concerned about this, who work in a regular way to try to advance this. Frustration absolutely is there, absolutely understandable. But as Dr. Boyle said, I think, in fact, in recent years, we have seen a clearly acceleration in progress in this. Is it sufficient? No. Is it accelerating? Yes.
Well, we've seen an accelerated in diagnoses, so we need to have the same
your time
intensity, I believe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.